My estranged father reappeared after 20 years only to start an affair with my wife. Now I have to tell my unsuspecting mother. Hey Reddit. I never thought I would be posting something like this, for real. My life feels like it has imploded over the last few months, and I am still trying to pick up the pieces and figure out which way is up. I need some perspective, maybe some advice, or just to vent to people who might understand the sheer insanity of my situation. So let me give you the rundown. I am Alex, 30 male. My wife Chloe is 29 female. We have been married for 5 wonderful years, or so I thought. Together for 8 years total. We built a nice life together, bought a house in the suburbs 2 years ago, both have decent jobs, the whole package. We were even talking about starting a family soon. The other key players here are my mother, Susan, who is 54 female, and my estranged father, Richard, who is 55 male. Now, about Richard. He walked out on my mom and me when I was 10 years old. Just vanished. No explanation, no goodbye, nothing. One day he was there, complaining about bills and work. The next day his closet was empty, and my mom was crying in the kitchen. It destroyed my mom for a long time, and honestly, it messed me up pretty bad too. Growing up without a dad, watching my mom struggle to make ends meet, seeing her heartbroken, it leaves scars, you know. She worked 2 jobs, sacrificed everything for me, and eventually she pulled herself together and became this incredibly strong, independent woman I admire so much. But Richard, he became a ghost, a non-entity in our lives. We heard rumors over the years that he had moved out of state, remarried, maybe had other kids, but nothing concrete. He never once tried to contact us. Not for birthdays, not for holidays, not when I graduated high school or college. Nothing. For 20 years he was gone. Then about 6 months ago, completely out of the blue, he resurfaced. He sent my mom a letter first. A long, rambling letter full of apologies, excuses about needing to find himself, claims that he always regretted leaving, and expressing a desperate wish to reconnect, especially with me. My mom was stunned, obviously. She showed me the letter, her hands shaking. Her feelings were complicated, a mix of old anger, lingering hurt, and maybe, deep down, a sliver of hope that he had actually changed. I was furious. My initial reaction was hell no. 20 years of silence and he thinks a letter can fix everything. He could go screw himself. But Chloe, oh Chloe, my beautiful, kind, empathetic wife, she saw it differently. She argued that people can change, that maybe he truly was remorseful. She talked about forgiveness, about how holding on to anger only hurt me. She pointed out that my mom seemed conflicted and maybe deserved some closure. She reminded me that I never really knew why he left, and perhaps hearing his side might help me heal some old wounds. Chloe can be very persuasive, and she knows how much I value family, even the broken parts. She also never knew Richard. She only knew the hole his absence left in my life. She thought this could be a chance to fill that hole, maybe. Looking back, her eagerness for me to reconcile with him seems incredibly suspicious. But at the time, I just thought she was being her usual supportive, optimistic self. Reluctantly, very reluctantly, I agreed to meet him. My mom decided she wasn't ready for that step yet, but she gave me her blessing, telling me to follow my heart but be careful. So I met Richard for coffee. It was awkward as hell. He looked older, obviously, lines etched around his eyes and gray in his hair, but it was him. He laid it on thick, the apologies, the regrets, the stories about how he had struggled over the years but had finally gotten his life together. He owned a moderately successful construction business in a neighboring state now, apparently. He claimed he thought about me every day. He cried, actual tears. Was it genuine? I had no freaking idea. Part of me, the 10-year-old boy still inside, wanted desperately to believe him. Another part, the adult who saw his mom cry herself to sleep for years, screamed that it was all bullshit. Chloe came with me to the second meeting for moral support. Richard was charming, attentive to her, praised my choice in a partner, said how happy he was that I had found such a wonderful woman. Chloe seemed completely taken in. She encouraged more meetings, family dinners even. She suggested inviting him over to our house. I was still hesitant, keeping him at arm's length, but Chloe kept pushing gently. It is for your own good, Alex, she would say. Give him a chance to prove himself. So, Richard started becoming a tentative fixture in our lives. Dinners once every couple of weeks, occasional phone calls. He even met my mom again, a very strained, brief encounter at a neutral location, orchestrated mainly by Chloe. My mom was polite but distant. She told me later she just did not feel anything, the connection was gone, severed 20 years ago. but she was glad I was trying if it was what I needed. Here is where things started getting weird, Reddit. It was subtle at first. Chloe started mentioning Richard more often in casual conversation. "Oh, Richard called today, he was asking about that project at work you mentioned." Or, "Richard sent me this funny article, thought you might like it." She started dressing up more when she knew he was coming over for dinner. Nothing too obvious, but noticeable to me. She started defending him more vehemently whenever I expressed lingering doubts or cynicism about his motives. She would get oddly defensive, saying I was being too hard on him, that I needed to let go of the past. Then came the phone calls. She started taking calls in the other room or stepping outside onto the patio. When I asked who it was always her sister or a coworker or her mom. Plausible excuses, but the frequency increased. She became more protective of her phone too, which was unusual for her. We always had a very open, trusting relationship. We knew each other's passcodes, occasionally used each other's phones if ours wasn't handy. Suddenly, her phone was always face down, or silenced, or clutched tightly in her hand. The late nights started about 3 months ago. Chloe works in marketing. Sometimes they have events or client dinners, so working late wasn't entirely out of the ordinary. But it became more frequent. Often, the excuses seemed flimsy. A last-minute team meeting that ran super late. Stuck in unexpected traffic for 2 hours on a route that normally takes 30 minutes. Helping a coworker with a crisis. When I would call or text to check in, her responses were often delayed or brief and vague. I started feeling this knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. Was I being paranoid? Was the stress of Richard's reappearance making me imagine things? I tried talking to Chloe about my concerns, gently at first. I mentioned she seemed distant lately, asked if everything was okay at work if she was stressed. She brushed it off, said I was imagining things, that she was just busy. She accused me of being insecure because of my dad coming back into the picture. She turned it around on me, basically. Classic gaslighting, though I didn't fully recognize it then. Richard, meanwhile, kept playing the role of the reformed father. He offered me advice on work stuff, offered to help with some minor repairs around our house, which I politely declined, even gave us a surprisingly generous check as a late wedding gift apology present thing. Chloe gushed about how thoughtful it was. I felt conflicted. Maybe I was misjudging him. Maybe Chloe was right. The breaking point came last month. It was a Tuesday evening. Chloe had told me she had a work dinner with an important client and would be home late, maybe around 10 p.m. Richard had called me earlier that day, sounding a bit down, talking about how lonely he felt sometimes and how much he appreciated getting to know me and Chloe. He specifically mentioned he was just planning a quiet night in, maybe watch a movie. Okay, seemed normal enough. Around 9:30 p.m., I realized I had left my work laptop bag in my car. I went out to the garage to get it. Our garage faces the street, and as I opened the connecting door back into the house, I glanced out the garage window. And I saw it, Richard's car, a very distinctive dark blue sedan I recognized instantly. It was parked about half a block down the street, partially hidden by a large oak tree, but definitely his car. My heart started pounding. Why was his car here? He said he was staying in. Chloe was supposedly at a work dinner across town. There was no reason for his car to be anywhere near our house. Unless Chloe wasn't at a work dinner, unless Richard wasn't having a quiet night in. Adrenaline surged through me. I needed to know. I shut the garage door quietly, went back inside, and grabbed my keys. I didn't drive my car. Instead, I walked quickly down the street, sticking to the shadows. As I got closer to his car, I could see the windows were fogged up. My blood ran cold. I crept closer, my steps silent on the sidewalk, and then I saw them. Through a slightly clearer patch on the passenger side window. Richard was in the driver's seat, and Chloe was leaning over from the passenger seat, kissing him. Not a peck on the cheek, it was passionate, intense. His hand was tangled in her hair, her hand was on his thigh. There was absolutely no mistaking what I was seeing. My wife, my father. In his car down the street from our house, while she was supposed to be at a work dinner and he was supposed to be home alone. I felt like I was going to throw up. The world tilted on its axis. I could not breathe. The betrayal was so absolute, so disgusting, so profoundly violating on every possible level. My father who abandoned me, who hurt my mother so deeply. My wife who I loved, trusted, planned my future with, together. It was the ultimate nightmare scenario. I stumbled back away from the car before they could see me. I felt dizzy, disoriented. I somehow made it back to my house, locked the door, and just collapsed onto the floor in the hallway, shaking uncontrollably. The image of them kissing was burned into my brain. Every interaction, every conversation, every weird feeling I had over the past few months suddenly clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Chloe encouraging me to see him, her defensiveness, the secret calls, the late nights, Richard's overly familiar charm towards her. It was all part of their disgusting charade. I do not know how long I sat there, maybe an hour. Reality started to seep back in, cold and sharp. Chloe would be home soon, expecting me to be none the wiser. Richard would drive away, probably call me tomorrow asking how my day was. The thought made me physically ill. When I heard her key in the lock around 10:15 p.m., I forced myself to stand up. I needed to confront her. I could not pretend. I waited in the living room, the lights off. She walked in humming softly, calling out my name cheerfully. "Hey honey, I am home. Sorry I am a bit late, the client dinner ran over." I flipped on the light switch. The sight of her face, smiling and unsuspecting, filled me with a rage so intense it almost choked me. But I kept my voice surprisingly calm, icy even. I asked her, "How was the client dinner, Chloe? Did you close the deal?" She started rambling about the client, the restaurant, some boring details, but her eyes darted around nervously. She knew something was wrong. She asked me why I was sitting in the dark, if I was okay. I cut her off. "I saw you, Chloe. I saw you in his car, down the street, with my father." The color drained from her face. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The fake smile vanished, replaced by pure, unadulterated panic. She started stammering, denying it. "What are you talking about, Alex? You must be mistaken. I came straight home from the restaurant. I did not raise my voice. I just described exactly what I saw. The car, the location, them kissing, every detail. With each word her denials became weaker, her eyes filled with tears. Finally she broke down. Sobbing, she admitted it. Yes, it was true. It had been going on for about 4 months, shortly after Richard started coming around more regularly. Her excuses were pathetic. She said she was confused, that Richard had pursued her relentlessly, showered her with attention she felt she was missing from me, which was total bullshit. I adored her. She claimed he understood her in a way I didn't. She tried to blame his reappearance, the stress it put on our marriage, anything but her own choices. She even had the audacity to say she still loved me, that it was a terrible mistake. I listened numbly at first, the shock still profound. But as she kept talking, trying to justify the unjustifiable, my numbness turned back into white-hot anger. Sleeping with my father, the man who wrecked my childhood, the man whose return she pushed me towards, how could she? I told her to pack a bag and get out, right now. She begged, pleaded, cried hysterically, clung to my arm. She said we could work through this, go to therapy. I looked at her, this woman I thought I knew, and I felt nothing but disgust and betrayal. There was no coming back from this, not ever. I told her if she was not out in 30 minutes, I would call the police and have her removed for trespassing. That finally got through to her. She packed a small suitcase, sobbing the whole time, and left. The silence after the door closed behind her was deafening. The next day was a blur. I called into work sick. I walked around the house like a ghost. Everything reminded me of her, of us, of the life that had just been obliterated. The photos on the wall, her favorite mug in the kitchen, the scent of her perfume lingering in the bedroom. I wanted to smash everything. Then I thought about Richard, the architect of so much pain in my life, now the architect of this fresh hell. I needed to confront him too. I drove to the cheap motel he had been staying at since he arrived in town. He claimed he wanted to give me and Chloe space, I did not call first. I banged on his door until he opened it, looking rumpled and annoyed. When he saw it was me, his expression shifted to wary surprise. "Alex, what is wrong? Is everything okay? I did not waste time. I know about you and Chloe. I saw you last night." He had the gall to look shocked, then offended. "What are you talking about? Chloe and I are just friends. I see her like a daughter, like a daughter." I nearly laughed in his face. "That is not how you kiss your daughter, Richard. You are a disgusting piece of shit. You abandoned me and Mom, and now you slither back into my life only to destroy it all over again by sleeping with my wife." He started sputtering denials, then shifted tactics, trying to claim Chloe came onto him, that she was unhappy, that he was just trying to be there for her. He even tried to make it sound like he was doing me a favor by revealing her supposed unhappiness. The sheer nerve of the man was staggering. I told him exactly what I thought of him. I used words I rarely use. I told him he was dead to me again, and this time it was permanent. I told him to stay the hell away from me and, more importantly, stay the hell away from my mother. If he ever tried to contact either of us again, I would get a restraining order so fast his head would spin. I told him I knew where he lived, where his business was, and I would not hesitate to expose him for the predator he was. He actually looked scared then. He saw I meant business. He just stood there speechless as I turned and walked away. Getting back in my car, my hands were shaking, but I felt a sliver of satisfaction. I had faced them both. The initial shock was wearing off, replaced by a deep, aching pain, but also a sense of grim determination. Now, Reddit, comes the hardest part: my mom. Susan, she still has no idea. She knows Chloe left abruptly. I told her we had a massive fight and separated, which is true as far as it goes. She was concerned, offered support, but respected my privacy when I said I wasn't ready to talk about the details. But she still occasionally asks about Richard if I have heard from him, seeming to hold on to that tiny bit of hope that maybe, just maybe, he was trying to be better this time. How do I tell her? How do I tell my strong, resilient mother that the man who shattered her heart 20 years ago just came back and did it all over again, this time by seducing her daughter-in-law, my wife? The thought of causing her that pain, of seeing that hope die in her eyes, it guts me. She deserves peace after everything she has been through. But she also deserves the truth, doesn't she? She deserves to know exactly who Richard is, without any illusions. Keeping this secret feels like another betrayal in a way, protecting her versus being honest with her. I am torn. Chloe has been blowing up my phone with texts and voicemails, swinging between tearful apologies and angry accusations. Richard has thankfully remained silent, probably scared off by my threats. I have consulted a divorce lawyer. The process is starting. I'm trying to focus on work, lean on a couple of close friends I confided in. Their reactions were pure shock and rage on my behalf, and just get through each day. But the question of my mom looms large. Do I tell her the whole ugly truth about why Chloe and I split, and risk devastating her? Or do I let her keep her slightly less painful, albeit false, image of Richard as just an absent father, rather than an actively malicious, predatory monster who targeted his own son's wife? So Reddit, what do I do? How do I navigate this impossible situation? Am I the asshole if I tell my mom everything, potentially destroying her peace of mind? Or am I the asshole if I do not, letting her remain ignorant of the full extent of Richard's depravity? Update 1. Wow, Reddit, I honestly did not expect this post to get so much attention. Thank you all so much for the comments, the support, the advice, and even the tough love. Reading through everything has been overwhelming, but incredibly helpful. It makes me feel less alone in this bizarre nightmare. The vast majority of you urged me to tell my mother the truth, arguing that she deserves to know who Richard really is, and that protecting her by lying ultimately infantilizes her and prevents her from making informed decisions about him. Many shared similar sentiments about truth, however painful, being better than deception in the long run. So after days of agonizing over it, reading your comments over and over and talking it through with my therapist, yes, I started therapy, best decision ever, I decided you were right. My mom is strong. She survived him once, she can survive the truth now. She deserved to know the real reason her son's marriage imploded, and why the man who claimed to want redemption was actually scum. Telling her was one of the hardest things I have ever had to do. I went over to her house last weekend, sat her down in her cozy living room, the one filled with pictures of me growing up, pictures conspicuously lacking Richard. I took a deep breath and just laid it all out. I told her about my suspicions, seeing them in the car, the confrontation with Chloe, the confrontation with Richard, and the full, disgusting truth of their affair. Her reaction, it wasn't explosive anger like I had half expected. It was worse, it was a quiet devastation. She just sat there very still, her face pale. The initial shock slowly gave way to a profound sadness, and then a cold, hard anger settled in her eyes. An anger I recognized from my childhood, but sharper this time, less heartbroken, more resolute. She did not cry, not then. She just looked at me and said, "That bastard. After all these years, he is still finding new ways to hurt us." Then she reached out, took my hand, and said, "Oh, Alex, my poor boy, I am so sorry. So incredibly sorry this happened to you." Her first thought was for me. Even hearing that the man who abandoned her had now betrayed her son in such a vile way, her immediate reaction was empathy for my pain. That is my mom, Reddit. Incredible, we talked for hours. She asked questions I answered honestly. She cursed Richard's name, she expressed disgust for Chloe's actions. She admitted that a tiny part of her had foolishly hoped Richard might have changed, and she felt stupid for it now, angry at herself. I reassured her she was not stupid, that he was a master manipulator. By the end of our conversation, something had shifted. The sadness was still there, but the dominant emotion was steel. She told me, "We do not need him. We never needed him. You and I, we are family. He is nothing." She vowed to cut off all contact immediately and permanently, not that there was much contact anyway. She thanked me for telling her the truth, however painful. She said knowing the full picture, even this ugly picture, was better than wondering or being deceived. So telling her was awful, but ultimately it was the right decision. It brought us closer somehow. We are facing this together, just like we faced his abandonment 20 years ago. As for the other players, Chloe is still trying to contact me, mostly through emails now as I have blocked her number. Her messages are a mix of desperate pleas for forgiveness and attempts to justify her behavior. I have not responded and do not plan to. My lawyer is handling all communication regarding the divorce, which is moving forward. She has moved in with her sister temporarily, apparently. Good riddance. Richard, complete silence. As predicted, my threat seems to have worked. I have no idea if he is even still in town, and frankly, I do not care. As long as he stays away from me and my mom, he can rot for all I care. My lawyer advised gathering evidence of the affair in case Chloe tries to contest anything in the divorce, which my citing and her confession largely cover, but honestly, I just want it over. Life is still tough. Healing is not linear. Some days are okay, others I feel like I am drowning in anger and sadness. But knowing my mom knows the truth and stands firmly with me is a huge relief. Therapy is helping me process the trauma of the dual betrayal. My friends have been amazing rocks of support. I am focusing on work, hitting the gym, trying to rebuild some semblance of normalcy. It is going to be a long road, but for the first time since I saw them in that car, I feel like I might actually be okay eventually. Thank you again, Reddit, for giving me the courage to do what needed to be done. Update 2. Hello again, Reddit. It has been about 8 months since my original post and my first update. A lot has happened, and I wanted to share the final chapter of this nightmare, hopefully offering some closure and maybe some hope to anyone going through something similar. Thank you again for the overwhelming support back then. It truly made a difference during the darkest time of my life. First, the divorce from Chloe is final. It was finalized about 3 months ago. Thankfully, it ended up being relatively straightforward. We had a prenuptial agreement, which helped simplify the division of assets. Chloe, perhaps realizing the utter indefensibility of her actions or maybe just wanting it over with too, did not contest much. Her lawyer tried some initial bluster about emotional distress or whatever, but my lawyer shut that down quickly, pointing out her blatant infidelity with my own father would not exactly play well. In the end, we sold the house, split the proceeds according to the prenup, divided our other assets and signed the papers. Seeing her at the lawyer's office for the final signing was strange. She looked pale and tired. She tried to catch my eye, maybe offer another apology, but I kept my gaze fixed straight ahead. There was nothing left to say. Closing that chapter felt like shedding a massive weight. Richard, true to form after my confrontation and my mother knowing the truth, completely vanished again. He did not fight my mom cutting contact. He did not reach out. He just disappeared back into whatever hole he crawled out of. I heard through the grapevine, a distant relative my mom still talks to occasionally, that his construction business hit some financial trouble, maybe karma at work. Who knows? Who cares? He is out of our lives, hopefully for good this time. My mom has been resolute in her decision to have zero contact. She occasionally expresses anger about the whole situation, but mostly, she focuses on the present and future on us. She seems lighter, more at peace, now that the ghost of Richard's potential redemption is well and truly exorcised. Knowing the full truth, however ugly, freed her from any lingering what-ifs. My healing journey has continued. Therapy has been invaluable. It helped me unpack not just the trauma of the affair and divorce, but also the lingering issues from my father's original abandonment. It helped me understand that Chloe's betrayal and Richard's actions were about their own brokenness, not a reflection of my worth. It is still hard sometimes. Trust is going to be a major challenge moving forward in future relationships, but I feel stronger, more self-aware. I've reconnected with old hobbies I let slide, spent more quality time with my amazing friends who rallied around me, and focused on my career, even getting a promotion last month. My relationship with my mom is better than ever. We went through hell together, twice now thanks to the same man, and it forged an even stronger bond between us. We check in on each other regularly, have weekly dinners, and just generally appreciate having each other. Seeing her thrive, free from the shadow of Richard, brings me immense joy. So, Reddit, the storm has passed. The wreckage is still being cleared, but the sun is definitely starting to shine again. Life threw me an unbelievably painful curveball, a betrayal so deep it felt unsurvivable at times. But I survived. We survived. What did I learn from all this? Firstly, trust your gut. Those little feelings of unease, those subtle red flags I tried to ignore, they were real. Do not let anyone, not even someone you love, gaslight you into doubting your own intuition. Secondly, forgiveness is complicated. I do not think I can ever truly forgive Chloe or Richard for what they did, the sheer malice and disrespect involved. And maybe that is okay. Forgiveness is not always necessary for healing. Acceptance and moving on are more important. Thirdly, you are stronger than you think. Facing this kind of devastation felt impossible, but taking it one day, one step at a time, leaning on support, and choosing to heal allowed me to get through it. Finally, communication and honesty, especially in families dealing with past trauma, are crucial. Telling my mom the truth was agonizing, but it was the key to both our healing and shutting the door on Richard for good. Secrets fester. Truth, even painful truth, can liberate. My life looks very different now than it did a year ago. The future I planned is gone, but I am building a new one on my own terms with a much clearer understanding of who I am and what I deserve. And honestly, it feels hopeful. Thank you, Reddit, for listening and for your wisdom. It made a real difference. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.